So today I'm going to go over my history so it's easier for some under people to understand how I know epilepsy. At the age of 8, I was diagnosed with epilepsy. My first seizure was I was watching the morning cartoons. I'm old enough that Saturday was the best day of the week. And I was just watching your normal Saturday morning cartoons, and I had my first grand mal, is what they called it in the old days. Now it's called a tonic clonic seizure, I believe. From that point on, I went 21 years with active, unstoppable seizures. Um, my parents back in the 80s, they didn't know too much about 80s and 90s. They didn't understand a lot about epilepsy. And at that point, my current doctors were telling my parents that, oh, yeah, he'll grow out of it. It's a very good chance he'll grow out of it. And so from that point on, most of my childhood, they didn't take it too serious. Um, my mother, I lived with her most of the time. My parents had got a divorce, and she took it as if because the doctor said it wouldn't be that, she didn't keep an eye on me as much about did you take your medicine? Um, or like, and I'm like, I was only 8 or 9 something when this all started. So like, do you expect a 9-year-old just to magically learn how to take their medicine and follow the routine right off the bat? No, you're talking kids. They don't know that stuff. They need to learn it. It needs to be reinforced. And so like it wasn't until I think seventh grade, I had finally gone like 3 months without seizures or something. And to me, as a kid, I'm like, I'm cured. I'm cured. That's the best thing. Ends up, no, no. I thought I didn't need to take medicine then if I had been cured. And epilepsy is uncurable. You can't cure it. You can treat it. You can get it under control. I've had it under control for the last 16 years. And in the future, it'll be more and more, but you got to do the right things. It's under control, not cured. And so as a kid, I was like, oh, I'll just stop taking these medicines because it's not necessary anymore. And I went like, again, another 3 months, no seizures, and I wasn't even taking my medicine. And you're thinking, oh, I'm just doing so good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that was not the way it works. And, I had to learn that the hard way. I ended up having a seizure in the middle of like history class, right there, right in the middle of class. A seizure, grand mal seizure. And that was one of the most embarrassing things I've ever had done in my life. For a long time, my seizures had been at night. I would be asleep. I'd wake up the next day with a headache, huge migraine. Nothing would help with it. No, I could take so many Tylenols and stuff. And this went on my entire childhood. I would wake up with headaches, just migraines, completely horrible ones, after having a seizure that night. So I have it at school. And after that, like I'm bullied, I'm made fun of. Everybody's looking at me like I'm weird because here's this guy who has a what's this that he had in school? Like no kid knew what that was. And, you know, as bad as my parents were with understanding it, what do you think the school's gonna understand? They don't know shit about that. So all they do is freak out that, oh, we got a kid that's, he can have seizures in school. Oh, we gotta be careful. And yeah, so school turned into just torture for the rest of middle school and high school. Because in high school, even in middle school, I got nicknames and I was looked at differently and all this stuff. And so, well, epilepsy is not some you can just figure this out type stuff. It's a 100% difficult situation, and especially as a kid. So you go from school, and anybody who's a millennial like me, or an exennial, that's what I am. I was born around early, right in between millennials and Gen X. Um, the best thing you can, or one of the things you know there is like, so time to go to college. You got to go to college. That's the only way you're going to get anywhere in life. I mean, they're not even talking about trade careers and all this stuff. They're talking college, college, college. So I graduate, and then I decide to go to a community college way out of where I live, so I'm away from everybody. Well, there it's a whole new life. No one knows about my history. No one knows that I'm like this looked down person that I was in school. It's going great. I loved it. It was great. I was shy with my roommates. That didn't work out very well, but it was going good. The only thing was then I had to start because my seizures still didn't end. I was still having some of these grand mal seizures occasionally, even in school, not in school, but at like my apartment. My doctors changed me to Depakote. If anybody understands this, one, in the old days, they didn't test you monthly to make sure your level of Depakote was right. They just thought, oh, you take this much and you're fine. That's not how it works. Nowadays, they have to test you to make sure it's okay because it is not a safe thing to not be tested. I started taking the max amount of Depakote because they thought that was the only way I was going to have anything under control. Well, biggest side effect of Depakote, tiredness. That ruined classes. I couldn't stay awake. I was going like 14 hours of sleep and then I'd be awake for a little bit of time. That's when I drank Mountain Dew. I started drinking pop. For a while I knew pop caffeine had a chance of being a trigger, but while I was on Depakote, it was like one of the only things that kept me awake more than like the 6 or 8 hours that I could get up because of the Depakote. So with that, so that my college life, then I don't make it through college. I drop out. I have to move back in with my father back in a little town. So like at the same time, even when I was 16 in high school, it's completely illegal to drive. And pretty much in the state I'm in, you have to go 6 months without seizures to even apply for like any kind of driving thing. I did go to driver's ed. I did do all that. And none of them understood. No one knew about it. So it was kind of like 1 month I'm not telling them about this stuff, but I get a permit and stuff because of the written test. But then you go, I can't get a driver's test because I keep having a seizure within those 6 months all the time, and multiple seizures in those 6 months. Well, I moved back to the small town. I'm stranded. I can't do much. I try and work with friends and family to do stuff, and it really doesn't go. It's a disaster. It's horrible. I have a hard time with dealing with this, and it's just, what are you supposed to do? So with that, my life is a pain. Well, now you go to more adulthood. So I try to get jobs from this point on. And I tried all over the place. While I was in college, I had some jobs and I never had a seizure during those jobs, so they never looked down on me. And you can say what you want, but people, you have a seizure or you tell them about seizures, they're gonna have a question about it. They don't understand it. They just don't. So like they're gonna question you. And you have to learn how to respond to it properly, that it works for you. One thing is you don't, this is something I did all the time through high school, college, my young adulthood and beyond. Um, was I would always like someone would say, "Oh, why aren't you drinking?" I'd be at some bar or I'd be at a party or I'd just be out with friends and then like they introduce me someone new. They'd be like, "Why aren't you drinking?" And at that time, I didn't know to like say, "Oh," because I didn't drive, so I couldn't say, "Oh, I'm the driver. I'm the designated driver." Or nowadays, I don't even say anything about it if they ask me why I'm not drinking, which most people nowadays in my hometown and all this stuff know exactly why I'm not drinking, and they're polite about it. But I started to have it because of my family disease, which is a kidney disease. Um, I was like, well, I can't drink alcohol because it has an effect on my kidney. So that was that's what turned into my excuse. And I've always never had a problem with that. That always felt less embarrassing to say something about a family kidney disease than saying, oh, I don't drink because of epilepsy. So back to the story, back in the early adulthood, I ended up going from job to job to job, just all over the place. Because, you talked about back in those days that you just work is the only answer. And like I said, they told you about community college. I had a debt with that I had to pay. And I tried every job I could, but then I have all these. I might not have a seizure there, but you're taking this medicine that has a problem that they don't like, or you're having a hard time just keeping a job. There's so many things that you deal with. Because after getting in with my father, I moved in with my mother down in the Quad Cities where I live. It's the nickname. They there it was kind of she was insisting I have a job and she didn't want me to stay with her very much. And she was also the mother that like never totally understood seizures. She tried to, she did her best. And I mean, I can have my grudges and stuff, but I'm trying to let that go and forgive people because if they don't know anything about it, they don't know how to live with it. If all they do is read, they don't even get stuff when you're a kid, and then as they get older, all they read is like the Times article about it and stuff like that. You can't expect them to know much or know what to do. And my mother, her family, they're not stuck up or anything, but they were a very successful family. And my stepfather's family was very successful. They didn't have the same situation I had with having epilepsy and can't keep a job. So I'd gone years working and working and working, and then I filed for, sorry about that. That was my cat, Billy. She is getting your face kind of cat. So she doesn't have respect for anything I'm doing, really. But whatever, you're talking about a cat. Anyways, so I did all kinds of different jobs down in the Quad Cities. And then I ended up getting worse with my seizures still. So because of back then, you didn't have there was no legalization that you had to insurances had to give you coverage. You still had to pay, but nowadays, but back then there was no requirement to for insurances to give a shit about you. And that was my problem. After college, um my dad's like Blue Cross Blue Shield, I think it was back then, they argued with dad consistently for a couple of years about how we don't need to pay for him. He's too old. He's independent. He's not in college anymore. That's against our policy. So then like getting medicine and stuff was becoming a problem because after a while I couldn't afford to get some of this medicine. Some of it was cheap and stuff, but some of it I couldn't afford. And I didn't have insurance. And at that time, no one's going to cover you. So then it turned into a whole situation. At that time, I applied for disability. I had work history, so I was going to get what they call SSDI, which is Social Security Disability Insurance. And with that, this cat, um, with that, then I'd have insurance, so then I wouldn't have to pay so much for medicine and they'd be forced to cover me because it would be like Medicare and Medicaid and stuff. And that was all I cared. I talked to people all the time about that when I applied, that I didn't care if I was homeless. I didn't need the money. I just needed somebody to help me with my insurance and doctors. Because if I didn't have that medicine and I didn't have my appointments with the doctors, I wasn't going to make it. And we all know that. We, we hate it. I mean, I hate that I have to see a doctor constantly. I still see my doctor every 2 years, even though I've gone 16 years without seizures. It's a requirement with SSDI disability. They want to, if I don't see doctors, then they're going to be like, well, why are we paying you for this? You must be better. That's not how it works. even if I have disability, I still have my kidneys, so that goes bad. I've only been on transplant for 8 years. I went like 4 years on treatment and another eight or some years on before that with my kidney declining. So I've got health situations and, still, even if you have the right to get insurance nowadays with things going on, can be completely unaffordable if you have if you have conditions that are expensive. And sadly to say, still, epileptic medicine and surgeries and stuff are expensive. You can't, how can you afford that? Your insurance may help, but then you're gonna have deductibles and you're gonna have to have fundraisers to pay for things, especially treatments. Back to the story, sorry. Um, when it comes to those days, so I did the jobs. I filed for disability. I went a long time trying, and I ended up I was pretty much going to be homeless. I couldn't keep an apartment. I couldn't keep a job long enough. I had it where I'd made enough money, it felt like, so my mother had me move out and stuff. And I worked at Hobby Lobby, but I was working in the fall. So in the fall, Hobby Lobby is just loaded with shipping that comes in and all this other shit. So Stocker is like a must right then. But by the time Christmas happens, and this is exactly what happened to me, they don't have shipment anymore. It's not every week. It's not huge trucks every week. It ends up to be like a truck every 2 or 3 weeks, not even close to the same. And so they cut the stockers hours. So me taking the stuff off the truck and then taking to the apartments and then helping after that, then helping specific departments put it on the shelves. They don't need that as much anymore. So then they're cutting the hours of the stockers or they're laying them off until the next season. So with that, that I was supposed to be on my own and stuff, and then here comes in where this job won't work, and then I'm not finding any other jobs and all this stuff, and my seizures are not getting better. But I'm taking my medicine, all this stuff, but through my teenage years and my young 20s, my seizures never got better. They just got more stronger and worse, even though I took medicine. It didn't matter. They weren't, the medicine wasn't stopping it. It wasn't controlling it. So you go a little bit ahead of that and go to 2000, I think 3, something like that. And I move in with my aunt all the way over in Illinois on a farm. And I go with her. She's my ride. She takes me to a place where I can have a job. She's like the finance person there. And I end up being like, I join the crew of maintenance for the place. So cleaning and, sorting things out and like taking care of the landscape around there. And that's what I'm doing. And it goes a little bit, but then I'm actually successful with disability. They grant me disability, and I'm forced because my disability was registered with Iowa. I had to move back to Iowa. So I moved back to close to my original little town, but it's more of a medium-sized town that I moved into. So it had a lot of this stuff. Like in the little town, if you don't drive, there's nothing. There's no store, there's no place to go, there's no activities. You are just stranded in the most boring place in the world. If you know people, you can do stuff, but like in where I live, okay, yeah, you got a little town, some people. Half of them are drunk asses. I can't drink, and half of them are just, oh, we're gonna have a party at our house, so we're gonna sit by you know, in the garage and just drink. Well, how can I relate to that? I can't drink, and half of you guys you don't even talk or about the stuff that I have anything to do with. Like, no offense, but I'm not a mechanic. I don't understand cars or racing or all that stuff. So, you know, but when I moved back to this other town, this middle-sized town that's like a couple miles away from where I lived as a kid, it turns out it's a little bit better. You got all kinds of stuff around you. You've got activities, you got grocery stores, you've got festivals and stuff that go on all the time. And it goes okay from there. I'm doing pretty good. I'm still having seizures constantly, and I don't know what to do with them. But then, and my doctors are losing hope on what to do. And then it comes around like 2004 or 5 or something. And my doctors talked to me about surgery. And this is um brain surgery because they after all these tests they did, they kind of came to the conclusion that my seizures were coming from one spot and then spreading to the rest of the brain. Where some people have it where it's all across your brain. You're having just surge of electricity across your whole brain, and that makes it and that time, because this is in the early 2000s, it was very, they only had like not even 3 treatments, and that was it. So there wasn't much they could do about helping you with seizures. If you didn't fit with those 2 or 3 treatments, you were screwed. And so they told me I could have surgery. And that was one of the biggest treatments where you could have that specific spot in your head where the surgeries were coming from removed, and then they would hope, like with some medicine and stuff, hope that your brain would heal that spot properly, and then you wouldn't have seizures after a time. Well, I was optimistic and I was determined. I would almost do about anything if it meant I didn't have seizures at that time. I was ready to try anything. And so I agreed to the surgery. Well, the surgery was a 3-step process. One of the first steps of the process was they had to put probes in my through my skull and have it through there, and then I had to have a seizure so they could detect exactly like the very like millis, just like so small of a spot, but they would know exactly where the seizure started. So I have to stop having medicine. I go here, I'm at the hospital for a couple of days, and then I have my seizure. Well, my seizure ends up being gigantic. Like if I'm not taking medicine, I'm having gigantic seizures. I was actually put out cold for like 3 to 4 weeks. Like I was on the machine for helping for breathing and all this stuff. There was no helping it. And I'm lucky, thank you, Lord, that I survived that and I was able to get up. And don't think you have to be religious about stuff. That's not a requirement. That's just my thing. I do believe in that because of some of the things that have happened to me. But at the same time, there's a million different ways to believe it. There's a million different, and you don't have to believe it. It's not requirement just for your recovery of seizures. But in my opinion, it helped me. And it wasn't that it was the miracle that started it. It's helped me make it so I could do these things. I could choose these ways. I had determination. So in this process, after the surgery, I had to go home. Had me get out of the coma or whatever I was in for the couple of months. So they helped me with, I had to go home because the whole process was over. And they couldn't do the rest of the seizure or the process right away because I was now in recovery. I had to get strong again. They were not willing to finish that process until I 100% was healthy again. So I had to move in with some family, and I moved in with my father. And he was helpful as they could get. I was so weak. And this is embarrassing, but this is also times when you learn that your family cares. Because you could go years thinking they don't, or they don't understand any of this stuff like I did. But then it comes around where they do stuff that really does matter in your way of recovery. And this doesn't have to be family. It can be friends. I've had years of friends being some of the best support I've ever had. So with my father, he's taking care of me. I'm a weak person. He has to help me take like showers and stuff. But then it ends up at that time, my stepmother was just, she didn't understand my condition very well. She thought I should have been able to be back to normal in seconds. And that's not even what the doctors said. Doctors say it would take months. So that started a whole fight between my stepmother and my father. And I ended up having to move in with my mother. Well, my dad found a place for himself to live. And that's the beginning of his second divorce. Um, for me, I move in with my mother, like I said. That's going pretty good. I didn't, she didn't seem too controlling to me at that time, but my mother was still who she was. So she had, expectations and all this stuff. So it comes around where I'm healthy again after a couple of visits with the doctors. They're ready to finish what they did because at the test, they figured out exactly where the seizures started. And it was now time to actually remove that damaged part of my brain. And it was damaged according to all tests that I ever did all those years as a kid and beyond. They came to the conclusion somehow my brain had got it damaged at a young age. They had never figured out, my parents never told them. And obviously, as an 8-year-old, I don't have any clue what hell happened. But, I can spectate that something happened to me as a little kid. And my parents never wanted to admit that that was what probably caused my seizures. And that's where like maybe your kid fell. Maybe it's not the parent's fault, but he fell. He like was jumping on something or he, oh, I got on the desk and I thought it was okay. And then I slip and fall and hit my head. Well, maybe I bleed a little bit, but they think it's okay. How are they supposed to know? And back then you didn't go to the hospital right away. So with that spot and them agreeing to it, we scheduled my surgery in that same process. So the day of the surgery, I'm getting ready to go. And my mom yells up from downstairs, "You got to take a shower." Well, I understood that. It's not like I didn't do that anytime. I did that constantly. The problem was in her house, she was a kitchen designer, and my stepfather at that time was a house construction worker, and he had a whole business on that. Well, the bathrooms had faucets that were not your basic faucets. So, like, you could turn on the water, it comes out the faucet, put most original showers that we know of, like there's a little thing you pull and it goes to the shower. This thing didn't have anything like that. It had nothing that explained how you got this faucet to the shower. There was no just lever or thing you pulled. It ended up you had to pull where the water comes out, you had to pull that down and turn it or something, and then it would go to the shower head. I didn't know that. So I'm trying to figure it out. And I'm just thinking I'm not going to do it because whatever. Then we go, and I hear my mother say, "I'm not taking you to this surgery or I'm not taking you to the hospital unless you take a dang shower." Well, one, that ticked me off completely. So I did my best and I got the faucet to go, and then I just washed my hair as much as I could. And I was fine. I put on deodorant and all this stuff to make it so I didn't smell. But I was furious. My mother can't like threaten to not let me have surgery that might stop my seizures. Like you're talking ridiculous shit. So I'm just quiet the whole time we get there. Once we get there and we're going to go up the elevator to the room where the area, the clinic where the surgery is going to be start the process. I rip her a new one on how you can't tell me I can't come here because of some stupid shit like that just because you want to be prep. And my mother was a prep. She was a person who image of the family herself mattered the most. And she was with me having disability and not working because I went like 6 years unemployed. I was only making cash at certain jobs. She didn't like that at all. So I went up and had the surgery. It was a successful surgery and there was no problem with it. And that can really happen. You can have successful surgeries, you don't get hurt, and then it can work. After that, I still had seizures. I had moved back to my house. My parents had taken care of me a little bit. I still had arguments with them about everything. I go back to to where my apartment. I'm living there. And, I have all kinds of incidents and stuff in life. But my seizures turn into these, what I call blackouts. So I would have a seizure of some sort, and then I'd wake up in a different spot in my house, or, like I'd stay at a friend's house and I'd be sleeping on their couch. And the next morning, because of the seizure, I'm waking up in like this empty bedroom they have up the stairs, and I have no memory of how I got there. And that went on for quite some time. And there was incidences like I woke up in someone else's apartment once, and that's where I had to put a lock on my door on the top, with a bolt lock. I didn't ever lock that, but because it was out of sight, out of reach, kind of, when I had those blackout seizures, my mind could never figure out, oh, up here, up here. It was just shake the door and then get pissed. And then I would also have, just little stuff. Well, the next thing that happens that made a difference was I learned that in that process, I learned that flashing lights can cause seizures and caffeine. I had a grand mal seizure, one of the first ones I had after the surgery, because of drinking caffeine with my friends. I drank way too much Mountain Dew, and I was not on Depakote anymore. They had changed that after the surgery. So I went to where, so it wasn't helping me with sleep. And that was the one thing with Depakote. It made it so my sleep was big time difference. Or, I had to fight it with the caffeine. So I take these Mountain Dews and I drink them way too many in 1 hour. And I have a grand mal seizure right there again in public in front of everybody, middle of the day, no privacy, no nothing. So here's another one of those embarrassments. Well, now you go even future up and like I learned that flashing lights can do it. Thankfully, I never had a full seizure, but I found out they triggered it. I was starting to have a seizure and I immediately turned my head from the flashing light and got away from it. And then that's when like Halloween, I learned like certain mazes or haunted houses and all this stuff was complete no's for me now because I learned that like if they don't have a cover for that flashing light of any kind, I'm gonna probably have a seizure right there in public. And so this goes on for a while. And then I'm still having these seizures, so they're still working with my medicine to try and fix that because it's still there. These seizures are still not working. They're just less than what they were before. And that's one of the things. You can have surgery and some people, a good chunk of people will not have the seizures anymore, but the rest will still have seizures. It'll be less than what they had before. You might not have them every day. You might not have as strong of them. It's a whole different story. So the next step in my whole thing was I had I had to change from one medicine to Keppra and something. I think it was Zonogram, Keppra and Zonogram. Well, Keppra, I was one of the people that had the full anger side effect, and not everybody has that. Some people can have it and it's perfectly fine with side effects. There's always side effects, but some of them aren't as severe. I ended up having the Keppra rage side effects, and I had that in front of I don't know how many different friends and stuff. And most of the time, I knew exactly what the trigger was that made me angry, and it was a really dumb trigger, and I couldn't stop that rage. I could feel it going through my body and my mind, and I couldn't stop it. Like I tried to fight it, and there were certain things I could do, but so then I had to change that, and I started taking. They switched me off of Keppra to Malicdol. And the way it goes, anybody who has seizures or any of this medicine, a lot of medicines go 30 days. You go down one and up another. So then I was on Lamictal and Zotagram. The problem with that, and this is when I noticed some things, is my mental health. I started having hallucinations and panic attacks and all this stuff, and I was hearing voices, which is crazy. You would never think that would happen, but that is a thing that can happen with your medicine if they don't agree. And so the whole month, I think it was in October, I ended up having all this stuff over and over again. I ended up in the mental health hospital. The mental health hospital, and the emergency room in the mental hospital didn't have any record of me going off of one medicine to another medicine. So when I got to the clinic and I had to take my medicine, they put me full dose back on the old medicine. We all know that is just asking for problems. So then I was mentally and behaviorally screwed up for like, I don't know how long while I'm in this clinic. I finally have a whole episode where I faint. And they can't figure it out. So they send me to the university. The university understands immediately what's going on. I have to stay there, I think, a couple weeks or so, and they take me off of they slowly get me back on the medicine that they wanted me on. And they take the Zotagram away. I didn't know this, they didn't tell me, but Zotagram is one of those few medicines that only lasts for so long. Once you go so far with it, your body, your mind just gets so used to it, it has no meaning to it. And so that's when they put me on Vimpat. So now I was on Lamictal and Vimpat. And I was still having my seizures, they just weren't as active. Well, during this mental health process, I moved in with my father. I knew I couldn't survive on my own anymore. I tried. It was just unbelievably. At that moment, I was like, I need help. And I turned to my father. And even after all these childhood incidents with my father and his anchor and all this stuff, he turns into being the most helpful person I had ever been with, ever lived with, ever had in my life. And I didn't know where it came from, but it just he turned into being the best person I could have ever asked for help. So I move in with him and we were working together and stuff. And then I start having, and I think it's because it was completely because of stress. So if you don't know this, the leading cause of seizures is either not taking your medicine, and then if you want to go besides just medicine stuff, the leading cause is no sleep or lack of sleep, because that can have a big effect on triggers. And then the second leading cause is stress. You wouldn't think that, but stress can 100% trigger a seizure. And so I was having these like small little flash seizures where, according to my father, my eyes would go wide open, my mouth would go open, and I'd make this weird noise, and then I'd be done. And to me, it was like things would go for a blur for a second in front of me and all this, and then I'd be like, I'd shake my head like, what was that? Um, so that was all. What are you gonna do? Then I was having those nonstop for a whole like year, and I was having them in front of everybody doing anything. I did find out that like one day tried to meditate, and I stayed in my room, didn't watch any TV, didn't interact with anybody, all that, and then I ended up going one day out of this whole year almost, no seizures. So I was pretty sure I didn't understand it at that time. So then you go this whole year I'm with my father and I'm still having these constant seizures and they're stressing me out. So then they're going stronger. Later that month, I get in um, where I get in and, or later that year, they're talking to me about they talk about me having the surgery again. And I say no to that because this time I'm too scared to do that after what had happened. But then they talked about putting I can't remember what it's called. It's a VM or something. They put it in your chest or something, and then they have wires that connect to your stem back of your brain, and it's set up to automatically react to your brain having a seizure. So when you have the electric surge in your mind, your head, this thing will do an opposite of that effect, which is to neutralize the seizure, which then makes it so you don't faint. You don't, you might have a feeling, but you don't have the same problem. Well, that's cool. So I'm going to do this. And they tell me this in like July, and they're trying to set up for the surgery. Well, this ended up being the biggest stress relief I ever needed. So I went the whole month of August on and off with seizures. So I'd have these one day have a flash seizure. The next day, no matter what, I wouldn't even try and I wouldn't have one. And then around August 22nd, um, I stopped having them. I just didn't have the flash seizures. And so me and my father now, or while he was still around, we would celebrate every year, September 1st, because we didn't remember the exact date. I had to look that up on doctor's notes. But so that was 2010. So from September until now, September of 2010 till now, I have never had a seizure since. And that was my biggest recovery, biggest thing I'd ever done to help myself. It was unbelievable. It was things I didn't think could ever happen. I had thought I was going to have these flash seizures is what I called like for the rest of my life. And it was depressing as hell. But I ended up, the surgery had led after a couple of years of it not being the grand malls and all this stuff, and then being just the flash, turned it up where I don't have seizures. Now I've gone 16 years. In that process, um, I joined work things for like what they call um, peer recovery specialist, which is every state has it. It's a national thing. It goes along with a medical. It's a if you don't know what peer support is, so it's where a person lives with. They use their lived experience of mental health or addiction to help others go through their mental health with or addiction. So for me, it's mental health. In that same process of that October, when I had those mental health episodes, they diagnosed me with bipolar, which made a lot of sense because over all the years of my young adulthood and stuff, I had huge mood swings. I'd have times where I feel like I wasn't really depressed, but I still would like, I'd go from here all the way up to like just way fanatic about things. And then I'd have huge anger spells at people after so many days. And it turned out to just be, yeah, they diagnosed me with bipolar. So there's my mental health. So as a peer support, I worked for a company. I actually, when peer support started, I was management. So I learned what peer support over all these years of doing a job where I cleaned dishes or I cooked on the fryer. A guy was talking to me all the time. Every like Sunday, he would come in and talk to me while I was cleaning about peer support and how he had a wellness center that, I could go to learn stuff. So once I get, and this is when my kidney was going bad and stuff, and I was on treatment. But once my I get the transplant, I'm way freer to do stuff. I don't have treatment anymore. And so not too long, the next like that was in June. And so by September, I'm like, I'm gonna go to this center. I'm gonna go to this place this guy talked about and see what it's all about. See what this mental health support is. And I go there and then I volunteer with them because he talks about how he's got to take all the staff or people that usually work there. They have to now work at another service. He started a business. It's a nonprofit, but he has another service place that is really important to him. So he's having these people, he needs people to volunteer. I volunteer for a couple of months and I end up being kind of like the management of the volunteering with a couple other people there. And that goes from like October to December. And we're just volunteers. And then in January, all of a sudden, he has funding. So he's going to hire people for this wellness center that he now can fund and he's all this stuff. Well, in that process, I apply. I'll be a peer support. He's going to train, they're going to have state training, and I'm going to go to that when it comes after a little bit. But as a peer support, I'm just gonna join and be a peer support. I'm not worried too much about like management or I'm not thinking that's gonna be me. Ends up, I do this interview, I talk to all these people in the interviews, and I end up being the management of the wellness center that I was as a volunteer, kind of the management of the wellness center. So it ends up outcome management, I'm peer support, I'm all this stuff. And from there, that was where my peer recovery specialist career started. And it's been on since then. And now this channel on YouTube, which I'm still deciding what to call it. It's either Weird Mind Warrior, which I have a blog online that is titled that is specific about living with epilepsy and mental health, or this channel is going to be called Epilepsy Warrior. I'm still deciding. But no matter what, that's my new thing. I'm in the process of starting a business connected to peer support, directly working with epilepsy patients. And this is the one thing that I point out, and this is something everybody should understand, is you're not epileptic. You have epilepsy. Never think it's just you. It's something you have. You're your own self. Your sicknesses or disorders do not control you. They are things you live with. They are not you. So understand that when someone asks you, even asks you questions about what you're diagnosed with, you don't need to say, I'm epileptic. Tell them, I have epilepsy. Because it's a big difference. When you start talking and saying that to yourself, it helps you understand you don't dwell on that it's all about you. You start having more of a confidence of, I have it. It's not me, but I have it. So yes, this channel is going to be about living with epilepsy and some of the things that you have to live with daily and things to know about dealing with it. Like I said, my website blog has all kinds of articles about living with it, daily routines, best ways to avoid seizures, what to do if you have a seizure. One of my favorite ones is about wellness and what is wellness and what is coping skills. That's a really good blog. And then some of the other ones are really good when it comes to epileptic topics. Like I love the one that talks about what to do after a seizure. Because if you talk to me, if you went back in time, I had no idea what I was supposed to do if I had a seizure. I didn't know there was any time of recovery. I would have a whole thing of stuff and I'd feel like shit and all this, but I didn't know of ways to make it go faster or me to feel better sooner. Maybe I still wasn't supposed to do stuff, but I would just feel better. I'd be calmer. I'd be more peace. I didn't know that stuff. So this blog and this channel are all going to be about those things. So people don't have to go through the same stuff I did. It'll be easier to live with it if you know stuff. And I know personally, YouTube, you look up epilepsy and all you're going to get is doctors on definition and medicine and new procedures they've done, which there are some amazing things nowadays. Just so you know, when I was there, like I said, two choices. It was medicine, surgery, and then like that in your chest thing. And that was all they had back then. Now there's like 12 different procedures and surgeries that they can do to deal with epilepsy. It doesn't have to just be those two. It can be like 12 choices on what works the best. And they have choices that work with the whole your brain. You have the whole seizure through your mind, all the electricity go through your mind instead of from one spot. They actually have ways to deal with that. The when it was only the two things, you had this thing, but the surgery didn't work because the surgery removal only worked if it was from one spot. Well, now they can deal with it more. So yes, if you are a person who lives with epilepsy, leave a comment, give me a story, let me know what you've gone through, because I'd love to know more about the people I want to work with. Because, like I said, my job as a peer recovery specialist is to help people with similar conditions live and thrive. Because even if you have epilepsy and it's active, you still can have a very successful, peaceful life. So, anyways, uh, like, subscribe, and if you want to get more, yeah, check it out. You guys have a good day. Thanks.